Hi there. Friends, we are missing you as much as ever. I hope you had a good week and found some ways to worship God wherever you are, like we talked about last week. All right, think back on our study of God's people. Do you remember how we have seen the people of Israel cycle through times of honoring God and then times of disobedience? That seemed to have been kind of a theme, and I'm afraid that Solomon wasn't much different. I also know that we all fail to obey God perfectly, even when we want to love God well. In our study of King Solomon these last few weeks, we have seen how Solomon was blessed by God with wonderful wisdom. And last week we saw how Solomon obeyed God in how he built the temple. Early in his kingship, he wanted to be a good king and honor God. But we'll see today how Solomon did not love God with his whole heart. Let's find our passage together. We're in 1 Kings chapters 11 and 12. Do you mind if we practice the books of the Bible together? Let's say these: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, and 1st and 2nd Kings. There are a lot of twists and turns in today's story, guys. There's even a flashback, and some names of people in the story sound similar. Try to read it together as a family, but don't fret if it's confusing at times. Even grown-ups need to read some of these Bible stories over and over to get some clarity on the meaning. So hang tight. And parents, our Bible story video does a good job summarizing this week's story. One plug for a Bible companion. There are so many good children's Bibles out there, and this is one, the Action Bible, that we really love. It is true to the scriptures and really covers much of the Bible. It takes some of these more complex stories and tells them in a way that's easy to understand, and our kids love the graphic novel style and great illustrations, so that's a good option. All right, tell me, have you ever received some bad advice? Maybe a friend said it would be funny if you teased another friend? Or were you maybe dared to do something unwise? I'm afraid that I have chosen bad advice in the past and probably given bad advice at some point too. In today's story, we're going to see some times when bad advice caused big consequences for the people of Israel. At the start of today's story, we see that Solomon had disobeyed God when he married women who didn't worship the one true God. Solomon's wives led him to worship false gods, and this is really serious because only the Lord is worthy of our worship, right? God warned Solomon about the consequences for turning away from him, that the kingdom would eventually be torn apart. We also see that Solomon's son, Rehoboam, the next king, followed bad advice that had a huge consequence for God's people. We see that no king led God's people perfectly. Solomon sinned, and Israel was divided between two kings. You know what God's people needed? They needed a perfect king. Can you think of the one who would be the perfect king? This is our favorite answer, you guys. Jesus. Jesus is the perfect king who brings God's people together. This week, you can talk with your family about our need for a perfect king. How is Jesus a better king than Solomon? How did Solomon's sin affect God's people, and how does our sin affect others in our family? Let's continue to ask God for wisdom like our memory verse says, James 1:5. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Until next time, my friends, stay safe and keep seeking Jesus, our perfect King. Until then, bye.